Hi, Marcus.
Think about it.
You ready?
That's not a meeting, that's just.
Good morning.
But it's not mine.
Good morning. We'll call the meeting to order. Can we have a roll call?
Director Ando,
Here?
Director Bernal,
Here.
Director Goldstein,
Here.
Director Moriello.
Here. So we have an agenda before us. It's the November 9th meeting of the Library Facilities Financing Authority Joint Powers Board. Are there any comments on the agenda? So seeing none, we'll move on to oral communications. This is the time where anyone can address us for a period of up to 3 minutes for things that are not on today's agenda, but within our jurisdiction. Is there anyone who'd like to address us today? Seeing none, we'll move to the Executive Director's report.
A short report, we have a good meeting today. We've issued our revised timeline. That's included in the packet. The changes are moving Scotts Valley meeting to December 2nd. Not moving the meeting necessarily, but the time for review and approval of the various governance documents. And clarifying that December 7th is the next Library Operations Board meeting, and the next LFFA meeting would be December 10th on Thursday.
Okay. Are there any comments on the schedule? Does that schedule seem like it's going to work for everyone?
So just for point of clarification, the 24th, it looks like, so that means that we're going to have sample docs that we're all going to be adopting by end of this week. Good.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll accept that new schedule and hope that that works for everybody and move on to the consent agenda. Are there any comments on the minutes that were submitted with the consent agenda? Comments from the audience on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move approval of consent.
We have a motion and a second by Mr. Bernal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. The consent agenda is approved as submitted. The next item is the staff report. We have direction for the LFFA JPA Agreement Amendment Number 1 to Section 2, the purpose with respect to setting the bond not to exceed amount and our changes to the bond distribution. It's in our packet on page 8. I'll turn it over to Marcus.
Thank you. After board meetings, LFFA board meetings, August, a couple in September and a couple in October, we refined the rate and method of apportionment model. We received updated polling data and had conversations about distribution of bond proceeds to the point where we're starting to get some real fine-tuned projections. The model currently contemplates, as included in the staff report, clarifications in multifamily residential and commercial were some of the bigger changes in the rate and apportionment model. Single-family residence, very modest changes. Multifamily residential, we've clarified that unit counts for multifamily residential would be based on units and not range categories. We've clarified for commercial that we're going to a square footage count, and we've got what we believe very credible data to estimate our square footage, the amount that can be generated by going to a square footage model for commercial properties. With some estimates on multifamily residential that we think are good but still need a lot of fine tuning, we've been able to overall update the rate and apportionment tax modeling to determine how much net proceeds annually could be generated by the tax. That's then used that went into our bond capacity funding model that we've updated for interest rates and bond distribution amounts. That in total, updating both those model sets have generated upwards of $59 single-family residential or EDU tax rate could generate $73 million of net proceeds after all costs, all issuance costs, and all financing related costs to be available for LFFA distribution member agencies. Previously, we've been looking at about $49 distribution rate. when we ran the model for a $49 EDU slash single-family residential rate, that generated just under $60 million in net bond proceeds. At one of our last LFFA meetings, we were looking at somewhere around a $62 or $63 million bond distribution target. That would probably put us at about a $53 EDU tax rate. So we are feeling very confident with the modeling. The purpose of today's meeting is to really see is the structure of our rate enforcement model comfortable now, where we're relying on square footage, unit counts. We've broadened the exemptions for untaxable property to include timberland, clarified some other use coast lands that we've discussed with this board that we should exclude out from untaxable property. All those were pretty modest, minimal impact on the overall tax rate. On the whole, when we look at the taxes generated by category, the bulk of the taxes are coming from the residential. 85% is coming from the residential category. The bulk of that is coming from single-family residential at 65%, and multifamily at 20%, commercial 10%, and the agricultural at 4%. The agricultural went down considerably from our previous tax models as we brought in the categories in agricultural, the parcel sizes from 40 to 80 to stay within a medium-sized parcel. I think that summarizes. I want to hit the highlights of our report. Again, what we're trying to get today is the rate enforcement model. We have Tim from NBS here to be available should we have any more clarifications or discussions on the rate enforcement model. We'd like to take any final feedback and or receive direction if this model is comfortable so that we can proceed with the final rate and method of enforcement report to bring back to this board for approval on December 10th. And that will conclude my report. I'm certainly happy and available for any questions.
Okay, so we'll open it up for questions from the board at this time. So I have a couple. I don't see the information from our financial advisor in here. Am I missing it, or did I get mailed in a separate?
You might have been mailed on something separate. I don't know.
Okay, because I know you just mentioned the figures about, you know, if it's $59 and we go for the full freight, we get something like 70 million, and if we go to something else, we might get something else. So are those summarized in here somewhere?
Yeah. More on page 4, we have our estimates where we talk about the $59 EDU rate for a 30-year tax would generate 73 million in net proceeds. 49 would generate 59.4 million in net proceeds. And we're focusing on the net proceeds that would be available. When we looked at the timing, if you want to get into the nuance, we need to get, once we have the rate and measure method of apportionment, there are some operating decisions that will have to be made. Timing of projects, what's the first? What's the bulk of the bond proceeds? Do we need all front-loaded, 85% of the bond proceeds in the second year? Our current modeling is about half and half, where we, in 2018, fiscal year 2018, we get 30 million, and in 2021, we have another about 30 million, 28 million that can come online in bond proceeds. That's just an estimate as far as when we think timing of projects might happen. That being said, that's all can all be fine-tuned with very minimal impacts on the net proceeds. It's just more a matter of timing. There's a benefit to the scenario where we're, in the first couple of years, without bond proceeds, we'll have about 4 million in excess of available proceeds to use towards design work, prep work. So in the first 2 years, we'll have about $8 million on hand in tax proceeds to use for project prep and development. That gives us time to refine any cleanup work in the tax modeling, especially for multifamily residential, so that when we issue the bonds, they're more secure. The bondholders will look upon them more favorably. There's already a tax model that's in place. They can see what the appeals rates have been. That's helped us reduce the interest rate where we think we're going to be able to. Our interest rate in our modeling has gone down considerably because of that delay. But that being said, I didn't want to get into the nuance of the debt schedule. There's a lot more conversation to be had about timing of projects that will drive that.
And how are you going to handle the allocation of the proceeds to the various entities?
How I handle that?
Well, I mean, what's your proposal for the measure for handling the distribution of the proceeds to the various entities? Because you'll remember that the proposal is to have those allocations made specifically to those entities for their projects.
Yes.
So how are we going to know when that happens and what it means in terms of the financial modeling and when the flow of funds will become available?
I would say two things about answering, let me make sure I'm answering the question correctly. One is at the last LFFA meeting, September 10th, we came to, and October 15th, we came to a general feeling of where the distribution allocation should be. We picked one scenario, and we cleaned up the labeling on that scenario. That was a $62 million allocation scenario. If this board chooses to still make that the target net proceeds goal, we would have a EDU tax rate of about $52 a square tax rate, 52, 53. And we'd follow that model. That answers your question about how it would be distributed. The second part of that is when and the timing of the distribution, which projects would come first. I would speculate that the LFFA board and working with library might have a conversation about timing of projects and which ones are more pressured. Capitol might have a higher need to move quicker than some of the other agencies. I think that would be the conversation that either the library operations or the LFFA.
So, but all of the proceeds would be available by year 5?
Yes.
Right.
Or
So-
sooner depending how.
Or sooner, depending upon.
We have flexibility on that.
Right. So somebody needs to do a schedule of what the
Absolutely.
distribution is between year 1 and year 5.
Yeah.
And I don't think you have to pick. I think everybody could get some because there's, not everybody's going to be needing the whole
Yeah.
allocation in the first year.
Yeah.
Okay, and then going back, my understanding was that when Suzanne did the modeling, she did the residential, commercial, and agricultural modeling at one EDU for everybody.
No.
So then
It was-
where is the detail on how many of each of these parcels and how much each of these categories generate and what businesses are in which categories?
So on page 3 of the staff report, we have the allocation of the overall rate enforcement model. It sounds like you're looking more specific as to what?
Well, okay, so you're telling me that you're going to have a small, medium, and large based on acreage for agriculture again. And you're not telling me how much is generated from each of those. And you're not telling me why 5 ADUs are necessary for 80 acres on a parcel basis. And you haven't told me how you're going to determine when there are multiple parcels, what we do there. And on the commercial side, you haven't told me how many businesses fall in each of these categories and how much each of these categories generate. So am I going to get that at some point?
If that's your board's request, we can be happy to provide that.
I mean, we have it somewhere, right? Because I'm sure Tim did.
Sure,
Tim
yeah.
did it. Well, that would be helpful. Do we know, Tim, where are these businesses? How many
Sure.
are?
Yeah, there's a table that could be provided that has, the various breakdowns of the categories. We did quite a
We
bit
have it
of,
by jurisdiction too.
well, I guess we could do that. We haven't we've just done it by the entire boundaries.
But I mean, is it sortable? Is it in an Excel spreadsheet where it's easy, or is it something that's?
We could certainly export it to an Excel spreadsheet. Somebody could, play with it. That's not an issue. But we did quite a bit of work to sort it out for the square footage and the breaks of the 2,500 and the 5,000 and all that kind of thing.
And the square footage you did, how did you determine the square footage?
We actually had to use GIS and map really each building. Pretty sophisticated technique we were able to use to make that happen.
I'm impressed.
I was too. It's evolving quickly, so.
So did we do a sample to truth test them to the ground to see that they're somewhat accurate?
I believe that's been done, yes.
Okay.
So help me,
Others?
so help me understand, Marcus, here, with the agricultural, the multi-res, well, with the agricultural and the commercial specifically, at our last meeting, I want to say about a month ago, we came up with the concept. And what I think you guys have done since then is you've applied that concept looking at the actual data
Yes.
and tried to ascribe sort of the breakpoints based on the natural distribution of the actual parcel sizes. So if you'll remember, we came up with this small, medium, large, extra commercial format. We just didn't know exactly where the breaks were going to be until the data came in. It's quite obvious.
If you look at table 1, which is in your...
We forgot what rain sounds like.
I could just call that up every time I was speaking, you know?
The voice of God there.
Yeah.
If you look at
We
table 1...
must
it
do
shows
this
the-
program now. Boom.
Table 1 shows the breaks of the commercial. You see, small is up to 2,500 square feet, 25 to 5,000 is medium, etc. And those were pretty logical breakpoints in the data.
And then overall, the single family is generating 65% of the revenue, multi-res 20, and then commercial is 10, ag is 2.4. You can see that break, but we don't get the specifics on how much large ag is generating.
Large ag is $50,000 roughly as a total, so it's quite small.
Offhand, do you know how many different people are paying that?
231 parcels.
231 parcels.
Out of 70,000 or so taxes.
All right. I don't have any more questions.
Public comment. Don't be shy. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Bruce Holloway from Boulder Creek. One thing I'm a little concerned about is the 0.5 factor for the really large multi-residential properties. I kind of feel like what has happened here is that what's being proposed is structured as kind of a regressive tax to be taxing larger landlords at a lower rate than smaller landlords or single-family residences. I kind of think you went in this direction because Mr. Bregman, the pollster, gave you political advice that if you make a regressive tax, then the large wealthy landlords won't be as inclined to oppose it. And I think that's a mistake. I think 0.5 is too low. I think if it was 0.7 across the board, I'd feel better about it. And I also want to point out that the Santa Cruz city manager said a month or two ago that he would be willing to have that rate increased because the city's share of this tax is very low per capita. I think the city's about 30% of the population, but the tax revenue was around 23 or something like that, 23%. So I really think that the multi-residential tax should be higher. The second thing I wanted to ask about was about the 5 years. I'm trying to understand, is this money going to be raised at once and then set aside for up to 5 years? Or are the bonds going to be issued in a staggered fashion over the years? Because I'm also concerned, if we're talking 5 years away, the interest rate environment could be very different than what it is now. It could wind up costing a lot more to sell bonds in the future than in the next year or so. So is the plan to have a bunch of money that's just sitting there not doing anything for a while? Or is the plan to stagger the bonds? Thanks.
Other public comments? Okay. Well, I did have some sidebar conversations with our financial advisor, and she did indicate that she did use the 1 EDU for the ag parcels and the commercial parcels in her original estimates, and that if you got us to $49 for ag and commercial, that you'd be at about 65 million at the end of 5 years. And if you went down to about $49 with no tiers, you'd be at 60 million, but with tiers, you'd probably get it up again. Well, let's see, that was 65 was the number with the tiers. So I think, you know, I would be more in favor of just a flat amount for the agricultural and commercial rates, notwithstanding all the terrific work Tim has done, because I'm just concerned that when I look through all of these, and I would like to look through his data, that what you're going to find is that those 231 large parcels are probably owned by a handful of owners, and so then they're going to wind up with 5 times whatever the rate is. Let's say it's $50 for now. That's $250 times however many, you know, parcels that they own in that category, which could be a lot for some property owners down there, that you're just going to wind up with a built-in group of folks opposing you on a, you know, on a relatively small amount of money if we went one way or another way. So that would be my inclination on ag. And on commercial and recreational, you know, I'd like to see the data, but I'm sort of thinking the same thing. Maybe, you know, maybe 10 times the rate, which is, again, assuming you're going to pay $500 now. I'd like to know who that is, so that, you know, I don't think an organization like the Boardwalk is going to care, but I do think perhaps a storage facility out on Soquel Drive might have an opinion about that. So anyway, that would be my initial reaction. But timing-wise, Marcus, I know you're trying to get to this soon, so we meet on the 10th again?
Right, December 10th.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
And then in terms of the rate structure, I think the polling, you know, gave us a little bit more room for comfort at the $49 level than it did the $59 level. I think, you know, we might want to try to head for the, you know, as low as we can. If we can, you know, do it at 49, that's great. If we've got to go to 52, maybe that would be, you know, that would be appropriate. We did have an occasion to speak to some of the folks from Terrace and Barnes about doing an educational campaign for us, and they were a little concerned with some of the polling information as well. And I think, would it be fair to say, Carlos, that they were encouraging us to try to get that number as close to that 49 as we could? And
they were encouraging us to, based on the existing poll, to get the number down, but they also thought it might be worthwhile to poll again with a more focused question, that he thought that they could get the question better written in a way that would get the poll results more favorable as well. So he thought, and then also because of the Cabrillo looking at going out, he thought that is also worth testing. So he thought a more focused question, more that you would normally expect in a 2/3 vote, and then also a looking at the Cabrillo question and doing another poll based on those two, he thought would be worthwhile for us to consider.
Because the final decision doesn't have to be, for the purposes of the ballot,
March
until early next year, right? So we could have like 2 scenarios, I guess, and then depending on the polling, go one or the other.
But
The only issue.
But doesn't the language need to be in the LFFA, or could we structure it in such a way that would still give us some
Flexibility.
room?
Because I agree that it'd be nice to be able to get the focused information from the survey to help accurate.
I think it needs to be in the LFFA, but I don't think the question is, it's a question, language in the question needs to be refined, that matters, and, that's kind of what he was getting at, and whether or not to do it, in conjunction with the Cabrillo measure, or maybe at a different time. That was kind of his...
Right. And a poll would help with that.
Yeah.
Gauge as to how
Yeah.
cut impact.
He was referring to the Cabrillo measure as,
Right.
Really occupying the field, because it is going to be such a, significant measure for the public to consider.
And it's a property measure.
It's going to be probably a geo bond,
Yeah.
so it'll be done on your assessed value.
So you'll see.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Marcus, I thought you might be able to clarify one of the points that came up during public comment about the timing of the issuance.
Sure.
I think you've touched on it already,
Yep.
but nothing, you don't have to add any new information,
No,
maybe reiterating some of the points.
We have 3 years from bond issuance to spend the proceeds. So the project timeline will be critical. Which projects go first? What are the size of those projects? What do we envision to be the timing of that? It's probably not feasible that if we did, say, a $60 million bond issue, that we'd be able to spend $60 million in 3 years. So hence we've staggered it out over different periods of time. So that's one nuance. 2, on the timing, we think the interest rates going to the bond market after 2 years or a year and a half, whatever it's at, with the rate apportionment model in place, we feel we can get to a AA rating, and that should give us pretty good security on a strong rate environment. So we feel confident that our rates are still conservative. There's still some room for them to get better, and if they go up, we've got that covered. I think if we went to the market now, our rates would be a little less than we're projecting. So we've got some conservative estimates in our overall rates.
But to put a finer point on it, when we go out to the bond market, we say we want 60 million in bonds to be issued in the following way.
Absolutely.
So that when a bidder bids on our portfolio of work, the expectation is you'll bid $10 million today and $10 million in 2 years and $40 million in 3 years, and that'll be the sequence of events, and they're bidding on that based on their understanding of the future marketplace, and they give you a price today for them to do that work over the course of years. So we tie it up that way, but we don't get the proceeds until we need them. Okay.
So there was discussion of going to a 1 EDU for all commercial and ag. Is that a recommendation to?
Well, I would definitely like to do it on the ag side of things, but I'd like to look at the commercial detail if that's agreeable, and I wouldn't mind looking at the ag detail at the same time before making the final plunge if we can.
Just to clarify, the data that we provided that based all these calculations on is not flat. It is a tiered structure. The 4.9 million that Suzanne Harrell was using is based on the tiered structure, right? Correct. Am I correct? Okay.
Well, I'm looking at her email. It says my original was commercial and all ag at $159 EDU per parcel with no tiers. So I don't know. She may have adjusted. I mean, we could verify that as well. But I think maybe what would be helpful for the group to discuss is there anyone who wants to get to a number other than 62 million?
Well, we want to get it to be as high as possible, of course. But it has to be winnable.
Number on that? I'm sorry, I just wanted to let you know that you'll probably lose 4 or 5 million in bond proceeds if you went to a flat commercial. I mean, that was my quick back of the envelope here, but just so you know what the cost is.
Yeah. So 62 million is our gold number, and if there's other opportunities, then we'll consider those.
Right.
Okay, and then
I mean, I think I said it in our last joint meeting, but, you know, Capitola would be willing to try to find a solution that works for all parties that gets us down to the 49 where we really see the good polling.
Okay, so that's the second part. So the first part is 62 million, that's our goal.
Right, and I think the 62 million
Well,
result, okay.
One at a time. We're going to try to get all of our goals on the table at once, and then we'll compromise them. Okay, and then our second goal is to get us as close to the $49 as possible, which Jamie's been saying all along, and I think that is a good goal. We should try to get there. And if we have to get to 52 or 53, we all understand what that means, but we try to get there. And in terms of the sequencing, let's try to be realistic. I mean, Jamie's going to be ready to go, Felton's going to be ready to go, the main branch is going to take longer, Aptos is going to take longer, the smaller branches will be done quickly. You know, what's realistic in terms of time frame? It seems to me 5 years is fine. You know, we don't want to make that 7. If we could help it, 5 years would be better than structuring that money over to occur within that time frame. You think you'll be done with your design and your community participation process and everything else you have to do to be ready in 5 years to be done?
Yeah, well, the facilities plan contemplated a schedule, right? And Janice, maybe you can kind of describe kind of how that.
Yeah, I just, and I don't know that I can, I don't have my document with me. I would be afraid to say very much because I don't have it in front of me, but there is definitely a plan. 5 years would definitely be absolutely doable.
Yeah, so even if it was 6, it probably would not impede the plan.
Right, but I think it does not have to be. And I'm sorry, I don't have the exact numbers.
Yeah, so we might want to double check on that and make sure.
But it does have a scheduling based on
Yes.
operations and everything else.
Right.
Right, and again, I think we don't want to close the main branch when 3 other branches are
We would need
closed, you
to
know?
figure all of that out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Well, I think it contemplated having a temporary.
Right.
Right,
facility,
something
right,
temporary.
for the main branch.
Okay, well, maybe we can ask,
Do we need to do some work on that?
well, just some, I think high level, I don't think you have to really get down too far in the weeds, but maybe just in terms of, you know, approximate scheduling, how long will it take for each of these projects to
I
be
can do
done
that.
approximately? And then, you know, if we start these, you know, in this various timeline, which ones, you know, probably will get done
Okay.
first, second, and third, and
Yeah, I think it's already in there. I just can't.
Yeah,
recall off the top of my
I
head.
can't use.
well, and most of the plans talked in terms of, you know, this will take 1 year and this will take 4 years, but I don't think they gave us,
No,
the
there
operational
wasn't,
schedule.
there wasn't, there's not anything in there to help, that projects how you should balance all these different projects, but I can take, as you say, a top level look at that.
Yeah,
and
just
tell
a
you
real
kind
high
of
level.
What you would have to consider. I could do that sort of thing for December 10th.
okay, great.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah. And then on the, with respect to the rates, the agriculture rate, that's just something we're not that familiar with.
yeah, I think we should just look at those, and I'll be happy to look at them if Tim gives me those.
The commercial
Details.
doesn't seem unreasonable to me. I mean, the methodology here, it's actually, you know, it's very well linked to the single family. I mean, the apportionment seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, I'd just like to look at what kind of businesses fall in these categories in the unincorporated area, because again, I could see in a city, you know, or if you're in Capitola, it's going to make sense. If you're in Santa Cruz, it's going to make sense. I'm not sure if it's going to make, I mean, I just want to be sure it makes sense in the county. And I think it should, but I just want to be sure. And it may be that, you know, collapsing that medium and large might make me get a little bit more comfortable, but, you know, we'll see. Let's take a look at the facts, and then we'll go from there. And then the same on the ag side. I'll run the parcels and I'll run the owners so that I'll be able to sort of see, are we going to have one owner with, 10 parcels? They're going to have to pay $5,000 or let's see, is that right? $2,500 if they own 10 parcels, and then you wind up with some unintended opposition that I'd rather not have, for $2,000. That's what I'm worried about. And then the comment on the multifamily residential, I kind of agree with that. I know we lowered that amount to 0.7 and 0.5, and I don't know if others are in agreement with that. I'm okay with it, but I was satisfied that the 0.7 was fair, but...
And wasn't a big part of that the discussion related to the mobile home parks?
I think that was a piece of it.
That was motivator behind that, but they're not necessarily quite comparable, I guess, to the single family.
On the multi-res, is it 0.5 only on the increment above 40? So the
Yes.
first 40 are 0.7 and then...
Correct.
Oh,
So really what you're talking about, if you had, say, a 80-unit project, is a discount on your last 40.
Right. So it's 0.7 for the smaller ones.
oh, well, that's a little better.
It's not a huge swing
It's not
either
a
way,
huge
and
swing.
I don't know whether or not it actually buys votes, changes the revenue that much. I mean, it may not be that significant either way.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, anything else we need to do on this item today?
No, I think we've got our marching orders.
Okay, so we're going to try to get to 62 or better. We're going to try to get to 49 or as close as possible. We're going to re-look at the ag and the commercial detail. Janice is going to try to give us a little bit of understanding of, high level, how a schedule sort of kind of might look.
The polling, I think it'd be good to
The polling,
consider the polling.
consider the polling, would put that on the agenda. And are they going to be here ever to talk?
We're going to work with Janice on the contract, and then we'll, once it's scope of work, we can arrange for them to come to this meeting, their next meeting.
Yeah, that might be really good, and maybe, have Jean come too, because if they want to have another little directed poll now. Somebody's got to pay for that poll. Who pays for that poll? Where will we be at that point?
Yeah.
Will we have a library JPA, or will we have a new JPA?
We'll
Or
have to direct it to wherever we're at.
wherever we're at.
The library JPA, whichever board constituency will pay for the polling, not this time.
Okay. And again, it would be just to test the question, test the Cabrillo.
In
Okay.
the specific.
And the specific amounts.
Just a thought, do you want to have a LFA subcommittee to review the ag and commercial? I mean, December 10th, we're starting to get it to really the
Yeah,
last
sure.
minutes.
That'd
And
be
it might be
great.
helpful to
If
have a
people are
subcommittee
willing to
review
do
that, so that on the 10th, we're not still trying to prepare the pasta.
Okay.
Have it ready to go.
Well, I know Steve has got his days ahead pretty well booked,
Yeah.
so it's going to have to be. Jamie or Martine, you want to be on the subcommittee, one of the two of you?
I'm happy to defer to.
Happy to do it.
Well, we're going to do commercial too, so maybe you'll be more interested if we do commercial.
I'd be more interested in commercial than ag, admittedly, but you certainly have 5.1.
I'm open to it. I mean, Marcus will be on it too, so if he's going to.
Well, Marcus will
I'm
come.
happy to
So
do
then
it.
why don't we do Jamie and have Marcus come? So we have, is that all right?
That's all right.
So we kind of don't have a quorum problem, but we do have the city's voice there. Is that okay, Martine?
Yeah.
Does that work? Okay. All right. All right. And I should point out that Exhibit B, which was provided to us, I did send that through the folks who know many more things than I about this rate and apportionment detail, so that's being reviewed by the assessor and others who understand how these tax codes work. So if there's any comments on that, we'll give those to you at that time as well.
We might have some additional edits. Over the weekend, we've been having some different conversations about what if scenarios, just to make sure the language is exactly how it fits. This is such a unique model to have an existing system to lay a CFD on top of. It's normally CFDs are for new development where homeowners don't exist yet, or property owners don't exist yet. So we're just trying to really make sure this fits this operating environment. We'll call out any changes on the temp, anything that might still be modified, but input would be much appreciated between now and then.
Okay. And Nicole will be the county's contact on that regard. All right. Anything else? All right, thank you. So the next item is written communications, which I don't see any. And then we have the board calendar, which we already have. And the next thing to do is adjourn. Thank you so much.
No, thanks.